Good morning and thank you for joining me for this review of Greenwitch by Susan Cooper, here in this lovely little puffin edition with the same cover that my first one has, cover illustration by Michael Heslop. It's a shame that it's got a marker pen on it, but I've tried to get that off and I can't without getting the cover off. We've got this beautiful image of an old woman segueing through colours into the ocean with some cliffs behind and a pier there to my right, which you can probably only just see. Gorgeous cover, great little book. I thoroughly enjoyed this one and I powered through it. So Greenwitch is the third in Susan Cooper's The Dark is Rising, billed as a supernatural children's fantasy book series and named after the second book in the series, which I've also reviewed. I reviewed the first one, Over Sea Under Stone. I've reviewed the second one, which was The Dark is Rising, and they're on my channel as well. Each one of those is a perfectly good standalone, but Greenwitch is not. Greenwitch is where the storylines of both the other books come together. And so if you haven't read the other two, this one was first published, by the way, in 1974. So quite a few years after the first one, but pretty fast after the second one. So here, it's possible to read it as a standalone, which is what I did the first time I read it when I was quite young, I believe. But it would be better, especially for a mature reader, to read it in sequence. Because in this one, the characters and the whole arc of the series come together from books 1 and 2 in a way that doesn't happen in the other ones. So you can read 1 and 2 as standalones. That might not even be a bad thing to do. But if you're going to read this one, read those ones first. And if you're going to read this one or on the verge of reading it, probably, I shouldn't say this because the algorithm is going to hate me, but probably go away from this video now, read them and then come back, because essentially you can't talk about this book without it being spoilers. So The Dark is Rising is the supernatural fantasy children's series where you've got the eternal struggle between the dark and the light happening, and various protagonists are drawn into it. This book starts with our protagonist from the second book, Will Stanton. He has just turned 11 at Christmas time, Christmas Eve being his birthday, and it is now at the beginning of this book, Easter, so he's had a couple of months to get used to finding out that he isn't a normal 11-year-old in a family of 11, of 10, in a large family living a normal life near Country Village in the Thames Valley. Berkshire springs to mind, maybe? And he isn't entirely normal. He's the last born of the old ones. He comes with a whole lot of magical powers, enchantments, and obligations, I suppose, from the side of the light to help defeat the dark. Over Christmas Eve, he's managed to accumulate 6 signs that are one of the weapons that the light will use against the dark, since the dark is, once again, rising. However, as well as being this, we gather possibly immortal, long-lived certainly, hundreds of years, being who's got all these extra mind powers and skills and has just had a huge brush with the supernatural. As well as all that, he is an 11-year-old and it is the Easter holidays and his friends and his siblings are mostly away and he's a bit bored. So, when an American uncle that he hasn't seen since he was a baby appears out of nowhere, visits briefly overnight with his parents and offers to take him on holiday to Cornwall, Will starts packing his bag before his parents have even agreed. And his Uncle Bill, after who he has been named, says that a long-term friend is going to pick him up. They're going to stay in this pretty little village called Tresselwick, which readers will recognise from the first book. That is the book which introduced the Drew children and the first supernatural hunt for the Grail, which was the least supernatural one so far. So the person who picks up Will and his Uncle Bill is in fact Merriman Lyons, Professor Merriman Lyons, an old one who guided Will through his coming out into old oneness and magical being. But also the Merryman, who we knew as Gummery from the very first book, the uncle of the 3 Drew children, who he has also invited down to Treswick. The Grail has been stolen. The Grail that they found in the first book has been on display in the British Museum, but it has been stolen along with several other Celtic symbols that Gummery, Great Uncle Mary, and the kids all believe were essentially done to convince the authorities that the Grail itself was not the only target. They were just after gold. But the Grail is missing and almost certainly in the hands of the dark. So Great Uncle Mary Lyons has asked the Drew children once again to Treswick. This time, instead of staying in the Grey House, the Captain Tom, who owns the Grey House, is back. And they're staying in cottages around the other side of the bay, which have also been protected by the light. On the way down, Merriman Lyons explains all this to Will, who points out very concisely that if the children who are also going to be there don't know anything about him, they're probably going to hate him on sight, but they'll do what they can. The Drew children, I gather that the oldest, Simon, is a little bit older than Will in regular time, so he's maybe 12 or 13, I don't know. Jane is around about Will's age. Barney is much younger, and they do indeed hate him on sight. They resent that their Uncle Mary is bringing another child. He doesn't bond with them, they don't bond with him, Simon and Barney, and initially Jane fight to exclude him. But Jane early on figures out that there's something different about him, and gets along with him and includes him slightly more. So, we've got a lot happening in this book, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The Drew children know that they're there to look for the Grail, which Merriman Lyons believes has been brought back to Treswick to find the coda, which was lost the previous year, which will interpret the final panel on the Grail. So this Grail has 5 panels. 4 of them are images of things happening, but the other one is code. It's written, but it clearly isn't a language per se and as such, or a writing system per se as such, but needs to be interpreted using a code. The code, Merriman and the Drew children know, is in a small sealed lead cylinder that Simon threw into the sea in his previous adventure to stop the dark from capturing it. So they've got 1 week here in Easter. There's a lot that needs happening. Will basically needs to keep an eye on them and keep them safe. All of them need to figure out where the Grail is and stop the dark from gaining more power. In this one, you've got more narratives because you do have the different individuals, but it centers around the Greenwitch itself. The Greenwitch is I'm not sure if that's what they call it in Cornwall, but the Greenwitch, as it's described here, is an actual ritual that has been done for untold generations in parts of the United Kingdom. Over one particular night, an image is built. It's called the Hollow Man. In some places, it's called by various names. An image is woven and built and created, and in the morning, it's pushed into the sea. Now, I don't know how true to the actual ritual this story is. Knowing Susan Cooper, it's probably pretty accurate to at least one. Trowsick itself is not a real village. It is an imaginary one based on one that Susan apparently visited when she was younger and living in England. Jane is invited to the creation of the Trowsick Greenwitch. Even though outsiders are not normally included, she is included as being a female member of the household of Merriman Lyons, who's practically part of them, or something like that. The American aunt of Will, who is also staying with them, is thoroughly excluded as being an outsider, and no men are allowed on the headland the night when the Greenwich is being woven. Jane, as the privileged yet cold and slightly bemused child, is there for the whole night, and she watches this huge group of women weaving this vaguely man-like shape out of various types of wood. It talks about where rowan is used and where the other types of wood are all used, and the body is finely woven of hawthorn, including the blossoms and leaves of the hawthorn that are still on it. As it's woven, stones are put into the centre of this weaving, which only vaguely resembles human, though it does have a body-like shape and a head-like shape. And in the morning, when the fishermen come back from overnight fishing, they come up, they join their womenfolk, and everyone pushes it into the sea. And that is their springtime ritual. Now, one of the Cornish women says to Jane that it is a general belief that any woman who touches the Greenwitch in the morning before it goes into the sea and makes a wish will get that wish, whether it's for love, babies, the traditional things that small villages have out of time wished for, or greater things. And Jane, who is awed beyond belief by this figure, she senses from it something timeless and ancient and lonely and sad, and walking up to it, she and probably all of the readers are expecting her to wish for the return of the Grail, but instead when she gets there, she makes a wish for the Greenwitch itself instead of for herself. And on we go with the story. Great scene, by the way. This whole night escapades just felt laden with mythos and folklore and fairy tale, and I loved it. Moving on with the story, Barney and Simon go out for a morning walk, and they discover that this one weird painter guy who's been haunting them in their shores from the dark, he lures them into this beautiful gypsy trailer that he's living in a meadow somewhere, and they see the Grail there. He bemuses them in such a way that Barney is convinced that it's okay to look into the Grail on behalf of the painter and tell him what he sees. I had a bit of a problem with this at first because it seemed like Simon and Barney, who'd already been exposed to the dark and its machinations considerably, were being very, very silly in trusting him in any way. Going up to his trailer was bad enough. Going into his trailer, accepting food or drink, there just seemed to be not a lot of smartness happening there. Until, of course, I realised that the dark servant was using mind powers to bemuse them into doing what he wants. At the end of this, and it turns out that Simon, who's a bit more suspicious than Barney, unaccountably, normally it's Barney who's most suspicious, unaccountably unsuspicious on this occasion. Simon doesn't drink the offered orangeade. I guess that's an orange pop, even though they are sealed. And after we get this sequence where Barney is reading what he sees in the Grail, and they realise that the entire ceiling of the trailer has been painted and there's some weird green glowy magic happening. And following that, they escape. Simon takes him straight to Merriman Leon's and explains everything that happens. Barney doesn't remember any of it. He has had his memory completely and utterly zinged out by this dark servant. But Simon remembers it, he repeats it, and repeats what Barney saw in the Grail and told this dark servant. At this point, Merriman Leon's and Will discover that they've got no time to waste, and they turn around, they're all at the headlands at this point, turn around and leap into the sea and swim down into the sea, into the depths, because the Greenwitch, having gone into sea, belongs to Tethys. Tethys in this book is female. I've always heard of Tethys spoken as a male god of the sea, so that was interesting. They swim all the way down to the deepest darks, protected by their wonderful magical powers, and have a conversation with Tethys about the Greenwitch, who essentially says that if the Greenwitch can be persuaded to give up the knowledge they need before she comes down to the deeps, that's fine, but once she's in the deeps, it belongs to Tethys, and she's not giving any aid to the light or the dark, but letting them continue on their own. There's some great writing in there, and a few more really, really good themes, which I haven't told you about. Read it, find out. Now, in this sequence in the deep darks, even the first time I read it, I was a little bit meh about, because while it's beautifully described, Susan Cooper is apparently from the age where anything in the deep dark is horrible, horrific, nasty, ugly, and terrifying. I personally think anglerfish are cute. I admit, monstrously cute, but cute. And right at the end, there's a giant squid all luminescing in the deepest trench. If I were an old one, I'd never want to leave, but Susan Cooper and her characters through her think that it's horrific and terrible and monstrous, and they're running away from it. Wasted opportunity, if you ask me. I could have one whole Greenwich all set in the depths of the ocean seeing luminescing squid, and I'd be happy. Still, having achieved something, though not much, Merriman and Will come back to the surface, and we have the final playouts of the dark versus the light. And this is totally spoilery, but one of my favourite scenes from here is while they're in the deeps, the children have been taken... No, it's after they come back from the deeps. The children have had a long day. Merriman puts them to bed and then goes out again with Will to fight what they know is going to happen on the foreshore. They know that the Dark Servant, is going to try and raise the Greenwitch in order to get the information out of her. And he does that in an unusual way. They're all expecting him to take actions, use spells, but instead he sits there painting, and painting is the way he makes his magic work. I really loved that theme, and I liked what they did with that. Having succeeded in activating 3 spells, one being the Music of Lear, I believe, and he raises the Greenwitch out of the ocean, out of the sea, where at the cliff base where she was sitting, to ask her to try and force her to give up this thing that she has, her secret. The Greenwitch resists, and as a creature of the sea, a follower or a member of Tethy's nation, she doesn't have to do what the dark wants, and she resists, gets angry, and breaks into a mythological million parts and covers the whole village. So with this elder power that doesn't really belong to either the light and the dark, and scattered throughout the village that night goes kind of cray-cray. You've got vision, you've got ghosts walking, you've got visions of previous days, you've got a whole heap of stuff happening. And Jane is the only one of the Drew children who has stayed awake. She's at the window watching it all. It's fabulous writing. Loved it. Okay, so this will do with me raving about the Greenwitch. Obviously, it's number 3. There's 2 more to go. I'm going to have to grab the 4th one from the library, and I want to read it soon. At the end of it, they have got the Grail back, and they have got the Coda back, because it's that sort of a series, and on to the next story. I really enjoyed it. It's a bit smaller than the other 2 are. I read it fast. Susan Cooper's writing was brilliant. I really enjoyed her writing. It's descriptive. It's so skillful and understated in places. Really loved that. I got distracted by a bird. Really loved the book. Really loved the way it was written. Really loved the story. It's a bit less of a grab bag of mythology. If I had a complaint against The Dark is Rising, the number 2, was that it grabbed a little bit of every kind of mythology from everywhere and just mushed it all together. Yeah, very enjoyable mush together, but you couldn't stop to start wondering about the background myth of the 7th son of the 7th son. You couldn't stop to wonder, what is this thing about the 11th birthday that they keep mentioning? You couldn't stop to wonder because there was too much thrown at you from too many different mythological sources. This one revolves very much about 1 or 2. You've got the Grail, which you already encountered in the first book, which is Celtic Arthurian. I guess you have got Will's 6 signs, which are the grab bag, don't really come to play, only Will himself. And you've got the Greenwitch, which is its very own thing. Great book, thoroughly enjoyed it. Sure, it's children's supernatural fantasy, but these are the children's books that made adult readers like myself, and many of you probably. And they still stand up. to adult reading in a way that not all children's books do. So, thank you very much for watching and commenting and being readers and people who watch people who are readers. So, without further ado, go away, read good books.